You know the fork in the road moment that a lot of you have come to in your lives, maybe even this past week. I don't know what's going on in your personal life. It's happening for a lot of teams this weekend. If you think about some of these games, what are we? We're week 8, right? So we're midway through October. We're week 8. Some of you have already had one of your bye weeks. Some of you are coming out of your bye weeks, and you're sitting there and you're 5-1, or you're like 6-2, or maybe you're even 3-3, but you could get hot in the second half. And the point is, this is not Major League Baseball. We don't play 162 games. So the outcome of one game, in some cases the outcome of one kick at the end of one game this Saturday, could take you from we're about to get hot to let's fire this dude, burn it down, and just start all over. That is the beauty and the nightmare that is college football, which is why I love it. It's the best sport in the world. We're jam-packed. We're high atop a festive downtown Nashville, Tennessee tonight on this Thursday, October 17th, the year of our Lord 2024, proudly brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. It's Thursday. You know what that means. It means upset alerts, and not just your standard upset alerts, people. Not just Oregon, you better watch out for the spoiler makers. No, this is the upset alert meter. Scale of 1 to 10. What are we feeling here? JP poll and FanDuel. There have been some allegations out there that they are one and the same, but they are not. They are not, so much so that I will prove it. I will prove it on tonight's show because the JP poll and the model, which are one and the same, will actively fight FanDuel, our betting odds partner, on this show. And it is non-sanctioned. FanDuel does not know about this yet. The second half is upon us, and I got some teams that maybe our audience hasn't forgotten because we're a bunch of diehards, but the casual college football public has forgotten about these teams. They've just tossed them on the scrap heap, and the thing about it is they're still moving, they're still alive, and in some cases they may catch a little second wind in the second half. I just don't want you to be taken off guard. I got Cole Cubelic coming up in about 30-ish minutes, and I already recorded the segment with Cubelic, and it's really good. I'd give it a solid B+, Jesse and Colin, B to B+. Which, I mean, you know, grading on the cube curve is a solid A- in everyone else's book. They're watching us in Johnson City, Tennessee, Siena, Italy, beautiful this time of year, Austin, Texas, the place to be, some say, in college football this weekend, and Pueblo, Colorado. Mind you, I will be in Knoxville this Saturday. I am actually driving there right after the show ends tonight. It's nice to not have to get on a plane this weekend. Friday night lines will emanate from Knoxville tomorrow night. Reminder, I don't do that on the YouTube channel. I only do that on the Instagram channel, at Late Kick Josh. Make sure you're following. I think we'll probably do it at halftime of the Oregon-Purdue game. Don't quote me on that. I'll finalize that tomorrow. Make sure you're following on all the socials. But that's the only place you can get that, guys. It is the most fun that I have, including the show itself, out of anything we do all week. So it's only about 20 minutes long. It's live. It's interactive. I just look at the live chat. I got the model pulled up in front of me. I tell you which games we're betting on. I add like 3 or 4 best bets during that. But I take your questions and I give you the model's opinion on games I'm not even betting on. So it's a really fun time. At Late Kick Josh, make sure you're following. All righty. Week 8, upset alerts. It's going to happen. We're just trying to figure out where it's going to happen. For instance, did you know that Texas A&M plays Mississippi State in a real-life conference football game Saturday at 4:15 Eastern Time, 3:15 local time there in Starkville? A&M's coming off a bye. I was just talking in the live chat before the show, which I do sometimes with you guys. Someone said this is a trap game for A&M, and I'm like, how can it be a trap game if you're coming off a bye? Just because you may lose doesn't mean you were in a trap. That's not the way I look at it, at least. However, my upset alert meter here is only at a 5 because A&M's favored by 17. Jesse, didn't you say that went up to 17 right before the show? 17 and a half maybe? Somewhere like that? I don't know. My earpiece is plugged with earwax. It's a sad, sad situation. 18 and a half. Wow. So A&M's off a bye. All right, Mississippi State. Here's what you need to know. Their most recent 2 have been their best 2. Now, it's been masked because they lost to Texas and Georgia. But they played competitively against Texas, and they put 31 on Georgia last week. They brought Van Buren in at quarterback. He's been better. And so, come back home. Been on the road a couple of weeks. You just threw for 300 against Georgia. A&M, everyone's talking about the Texas game. Everyone's talking about the LSU game down the road. Could you clip them? Yeah. Yes, you could. Yes. Crazier things have happened. This is the SEC in 2024. Anything could happen. I'm not overlooking this. I'm putting a 5 on it on the upset alert concern meter. Next up, let's go 3:30 Eastern Saturday, Michigan is at Illinois. Michigan is laying 3.5 points. Yes, with that offense, they're laying 3.5. They're coming out of their bye too. They have this is a paper popper of a stat. Michigan has played 6 games. They have surpassed 135 yards passing once. Once in half a dozen games, they have thrown for over 135. To compare that, several teams have done that in a quarter of football at various points during the season. Luke Altmaier at Illinois, quarterback there, coming off his best game. He needed it because they had to score like half 100 last week. Now, here's the downside, and this is why I'm still going to be mildly to moderately concerned about this game. I'm putting an 8 on the upset alert concern scale here. Illinois is 77th in the country in run defense, which means you got to do what Texas did. You got to get a lead on Michigan. You got to get a lead, early lead, basically just continue a lot of that scoring momentum you had last week, and things could go well for you. I've got an 8 here. This wouldn't be a huge upset anyway. It's 3.5-point spread. Next up, a little bigger spread. Same time slot, 3:30, the mid-afternoon window. I hate where this game is being played. Notre Dame is, Jesse, is that number right, 9.5? I had a bad number on my sheet of paper here, if so. Anyway, Notre Dame's playing Georgia Tech. Yeah, that number's right. Wow. Okay, Notre Dame minus 9.5 against Georgia Tech. I have got a 6 on the upset alert concern meter here. It's a neutral field game. That's the reason why I hate it, because they're playing it down the road from Georgia Tech. They're playing it in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which would be great if you were playing Syracuse there, all due respect. You're playing Notre Dame, so they'll probably outnumber you, but hey, I understand. We got to make that gate money. Haynes King is a game-time decision here for Georgia Tech. It's a big deal, starting quarterback. They lead the ACC in rushing right now, just like they led the ACC in rushing last year. Georgia Tech has kind of started to take on this feel as a big game program, a program that you can count on showing up in big games. And Notre Dame, conversely, has not trailed since basically the Northern Illinois game. In fact, I don't know if they've trailed at all. If they have, it's been very fleeting and momentary. And so, can you put them in that situation? I think that Brent Key and Georgia Tech can. Notre Dame keeps incurring injury after injury after injury. J.P. Poll still loves Notre Dame. J.P. Poll, actually, I'll give you a little early taste of what Friday Night Lions is like. Someone puts Notre Dame, Georgia Tech in the live chat. I pull it up. The model actually loves Notre Dame to cover this week at a 62% cover probability. I'm not betting it because I don't trust this model properly accounting for the cumulative effect of injury on Notre Dame. So, I've still got concern here. I'm going to make it a 6 on the upset alert concern scale. Nebraska is at Indiana this week. Indy, not Nebraska, Indy is laying 6.5. I'm concerned. Big noon kickoff there. I'm concerned. I'm concerned because we can't take anything for granted with Indiana. Indiana is one of 2 teams in the country that hasn't trailed. That's wonderful. They have won every game. They're 7-0. They've won every game by 14 plus. That is wonderful. It hasn't been a murderer's row yet. And not that you got a top 5 team coming in here, but it's the best team you probably played so far. In fact, there's no probably. Nebraska's the best team you've played so far. It's the best test to date. Nebraska's coming off a bye, which is wild because I think I saw the next 4 teams Nebraska plays are all off byes, which is a dereliction of scheduling duty, but I digress. I'm putting an 8 on this. I am concerned. I look at Nebraska, and I think that this is a ripe opportunity for them to pick someone off that in the preseason you never would have guessed. You didn't look at this spot if you're a Nebraska fan in the preseason and say, ooh, we'll play back-to-back ranked teams, Indiana and Ohio State. No, you just thought, we got some winnable games before Ohio State. You never thought you'd be a dog in this game. I'm going to put an 8 on it. I do think Nebraska can do some business here. Next up, how about this inversion? All right, in the preseason, a lot of you people, of whomst I am one, loved Oklahoma State to go to the Big 12 championship game. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. But they are going to go to Provo, Utah this weekend because they're going to play Brigham Young. Undefeated Brigham Young. Screwed out of the J.P. Poll top 25 Brigham Young, according to some, maybe even me. Brigham Young minus 9.5. I don't know what the futures number on this was in the preseason market or if they even posted it at FanDuel, but I can promise you one thing. Oklahoma State wasn't getting points against Brigham Young. This is a Friday game, by the way. It's a late kickoff. It's 10:15 Eastern. I've got a 7.5 on this. And now Oklahoma State has been a complete no-show of a team this year, but they're coming off their bye, and they are facing a team that on the surface has been one of the stories of college football this year, which is great. Everything is deserved on the part of Brigham Young. Here's the potential problem when it comes to looking ahead, not in the rear view. They can't take the wins away from you. But if we're trying to be predictive about this, and part of the reason why the model wouldn't have Brigham Young a little bit higher is they're 7th in turnovers created, which again is wonderful. It is not always the best predictive metric for what you will be the rest of the way, not merit, predictability. They are bottom half of the country in total offense, but they've taken the ball away. That's, I think, the only team in the country to have a fumble return for a touchdown, an interception for a touchdown, a kickoff return for a touchdown, a punt return for a touchdown. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So total inversion on what this game would have been in the preseason versus what it is now. Having said that, even though Brigham Young laying 9.5 at home, I've got like a 7.5 on the upset alert concern scale. And it's not because Oklahoma State has shown me anything. Trust me, they have not. But this would be the random spot with your opponent coming off a bye and you've been rolling and you've had that turnover fortune on your side. If it doesn't show up even 1 week, you're in a dogfight automatically. 7.5 there. And lastly, some people in the chat said I should dare not even bring this game up. But Oregon just played Ohio State. They won. Letdown spot, right? Of course. They are traveling to West Lafayette, Indiana, across 2 time zones. So we've got letdown spot. We've got long Big Ten travel spot. It's a Friday game. So we've got short rest spot. And they're playing the spoiler makers, with an entire coaching staff being told it's do or die time for them. So we got the letdown, we got the travel, we got the short rest here, and need I remind everyone, once upon a time, Alabama beat Georgia in a game eerily similar to Oregon over Ohio State. And then what did Alabama do the next week? As I recall, they went to Vanderbilt and toted an L all the way home to Tuscaloosa. So Oregon goes to Purdue, favored by 28.5. No one concerned. The live chat telling me I shouldn't even bring the game up. Ryan Brown at quarterback, second half last week, 46 points. Second half last week. All I'm saying is I am putting a 3.5 on this. Not overly concerned, but if Purdue pops them early, just like Vandy did against Alabama, this is a 4-quarter game. Because it sets up, it's got all the hallmarks. Honestly, I've used this term already. I think it's a dereliction of scheduling duty. Let me take it a step further. It is trash to have a team play a conference game and then fly 2 time zones on short rest to play another conference game. Garbage. I know you got this Friday night package and whatnot, immunity, should never happen. Just because it happens to be Purdue and you happen to be favored by a lot, what if it was Indiana? You know, a team no one expected from in the preseason, but all of a sudden they're undefeated and they're top 20, and you're going in there, and it's another dogfight, and you're on 6 days rest coming off the Ohio State game, having to travel 2,500, 3,000 miles. Should never be able to happen. But that's up to the Big Ten's league scheduling office. I'm going to put a 3.5 on the upset alert concern meter there. Academy Sports and Outdoors, no matter if you're going to get upset, if you're doing the upset, you will never be upset if you visit them for all of your tailgating needs, all of your outdoor needs, dare I say most of your indoor needs, if you're as minimalist in your lifestyle as some of us. Got your Big League Chew, got your hunting gear, got your camping gear, got your grilling gear, got everything under the sun, and you may even get your little t-shirt or, I don't know, what else do you need? You need a car flag? They got them over there. They got everything. And a lot of stuff that you would never even know you needed, or you do need and you didn't know you could get at Academy. Academy.com, if you can't get there in person, or even if you do have an Academy in your neighborhood, but you're a little nervous, you know, you're a little intimidated. You see it from the outside, looks beautiful, but I don't know if I want to go in yet. Let me go to academy.com and peruse. That'll show you a lot of the selection they have in there that you did not know existed, and then you'll be in there. It won't be too long. You'll be in there. Moving right along. We're going to have a fight. We're going to have a fight. It may not be for the weak at heart. So if you don't like confrontation, and you're watching live, or if you're listening on pod or watching the replay, maybe just fast forward through this part. Don't do that. It's not that serious. But I did want to give you fair warning. It's like we've got the TV PG era, and then we shift into the attitude era portion of the show, as producer Jesse and I were discussing beforehand. I've probably built this up a lot more than it will actually deliver upon, but that's okay. So, Colin, here's your endpoint. Actually, let me take a sip from the chalice. Now, here's your endpoint. I release the JP poll every Tuesday. It's my power ratings. It is not rankings. Big difference in the two, as we have to document every week. And lately, because we've partnered with FanDuel, people have been hurling some accusations at us. And the accusation is, oh, you're just releasing FanDuel's numbers. I mean, why are you calling this your poll? It's just FanDuel's numbers. And then afterwards, you come out when people fight you on it, and you say, hey, here's the evidence I'm right. FanDuel backed me up. Well, it is true that there is heavy correlation, because if I am claiming to set up my power ratings in very much an odds-making, neutral field favorability sort of methodology, it stands to reason that a major sportsbook partner and their internal numbers would closely align with it if the model is worth its salt. Let me put it that way, which we think it is, because we've won money with it for a long time. And so, that is the case, that when I say things like so-and-so would be favored over so-and-so on a neutral field according to the model, I hit FanDuel up, and a lot of times they back me up on that. But not all the time. Not all the time. I just don't tell you when they don't back me up. Until tonight. Because the accusations have gone on, and the flames have been fanned for far too long. So tonight, I think we should take the opportunity on this very program to air out some dirty laundry from here within the Pate State family. We love FanDuel. FanDuel has been a great partner for us, but we don't agree with FanDuel across the board. At least the model doesn't. The model has a mind of its own. It spits out the JP poll every Tuesday night. Let me give you an example. First, I'll give you an example of where we agreed this week. I go to Eugene last weekend, right? And we all watched Ohio State lose to Oregon close. And then we come home, and Sunday we react to the game. And then Monday, I can't even remember what I did Monday. And then Tuesday we have the show. I put out the JP poll, and what did it say, Jesse and Colin? It said Ohio State's still number 1 in the country. And Oregon's number 4? Like, what sense does this make? And a lot of folks had an issue with this, even though I explained what we do. I explain it every week. They couldn't square in their mind. Some people even claimed to understand the methodology, but still couldn't understand how you watch the result on the field, but then you say Ohio State's still over Oregon. And I had the hardest time not coming unglued. And I'm a very, very calm person. We're not even talking about opinion, guys. On this particular front, we're not even talking about opinion. Ohio State did lose to Oregon. And I am a person that absolutely values the results on the field. That's why if you made me fill out a ballot right now, I'd put Oregon above Ohio State. That's why if I were on the playoff committee and they made me seed the playoff today, I would put Oregon above Ohio State because they beat them, so they deserve it. But that's not what we're doing with the JP poll. We're listing teams in order of how they would be favored on a neutral field according to this computer. So I hit FanDuel up and I said, guys, I'm getting a lot of pushback on this. Give me what the hypothetical number would be if Oregon played Ohio State this week. If they played in Indianapolis or Arizona, I don't care. Just put it on a neutral field. Ohio State minus 2.5. So we were not talking about me saying, I think the color blue is best, and you say, nuh-uh, red's best. I was saying the sky is blue, and you were saying, it's not blue. It's not matter of opinion. That this happens to be a fact that still be favored. Now, you can care or not care about that. I don't ever put these numbers out as a means to suggest that even though Ohio State lost, they should still go in over so-and-so, or they should still be ranked ahead of so-and-so. All it is basically a resource. That's all it is. It's a little bit different than the AP. Now, having said that, FanDuel and I have not agreed on everything this week. For instance, the Ole Miss conundrum. I told you going into the Ole Miss LSU game, did I not? I said it on the show. The LSU board had a field day with it. But I said, I think LSU I think LSU narrowly beats Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss is the better team. I am picking Ole Miss to lose. And if they lose close, I'll probably still have Ole Miss very high, because if the model expects something and that thing happens exactly as the model thought it would, the model sees no reason to change where it had that team. The result delivered was exactly what it thought should be delivered, especially given the dynamics of Ole Miss playing their 7th consecutive game, 2nd consecutive road game at that, and LSU being rested at home. So I didn't bump, nor did the model bump Ole Miss down in the JP poll. In fact, we kept Ole Miss at 7. Bama was at 8. What is that telling you? Well, that's telling you that this model right here, if it saw Ole Miss versus Alabama on a neutral field, I'll give you the number. It would make Ole Miss a 0.1 point favorite. So they were basically tied, but there was a 1/10 of a point that separated them. FanDuel disagrees. Pretty big. I hit up David and I said, hey, what would your traders make this number? They would make Bama a 3.5 point favorite against Ole Miss if they played on a neutral field today. That's not public. You can't find that anywhere. I've got the relationship with them. I am telling you, I confirm that with them. So we are way off. They have bumped Ole Miss down in their own internal ratings a lot more than I have. Either that or they kept Bama a lot higher than I have. Probably a combo of the two. But we are 3.5 points off. That is a massive gap, by the way. In the odds-making community, 3.5 points difference on a team or a combo of teams is a pretty big deal. So we disagree there. So that's one fight, the Ole Miss-Bama fight. There's another fight that FanDuel and the JP poll are waging as we speak, and that's an ACC special, an ACC Street Corner special, and it is Clemson and Miami, because the JP poll has Clemson at 5 this week and Miami at 6. Right now, my model right here would favor Clemson by 0.3 points if they played Miami, let's say in Charlotte. FanDuel disagrees. They hit me, and they said if we had to hang that number today, we would make it Miami -2 against Clemson. So we are a couple of points off our opinion of how that game should line up. Now, here's what would happen. If the game was scheduled this week, this happens every week, by the way. If the game was scheduled this week and they put out Miami -2 against Clemson, all we'd do is we'd look at it, we'd run it through the model. The model would spit out that that's probably about a 58.5% play on Clemson, and we would decide whether we want to bet it or not. We'd wait to see if there was early action. We would hope that money came in on Miami to push it to 3, where we could get a solid field goal edge with Clemson. Probably wouldn't happen. But that's another disagreement. And I'll tell you a third disagreement, and this is the one that's been the most high profile. This is the one I would say by far we've taken the most flack for, Brigham Young, because I don't have him in the top 25. And that's because the profile of the team is that of a team that normally is not sustaining a top 25 performance. All I mean by that, as I explained a few minutes ago, is a team that is powered disproportionately by turnover luck normally tends to see that run out at some point in the year. There have been cases where you just don't see it run out, and that team rides that wave all year long. What we call that is an outlier. That is the exception to the rule. If you've built a pretty solid, dependable, predictive model, every year you will have exceptions to the rule. Washington last year was a big exception to the rule. There's a reason why that team beat Oregon in round 1 and then played Oregon again, and they were nearly a 10-point underdog. And what'd they do? They beat them again. And if they played a third time, Oregon would have still been favored. And they may have beaten them a third time, and Oregon would be favored the 4th game. That would have continued for quite a while. Washington was just the exception. They were the fly in the ointment. You do not change your entire methodology based on outliers. You just look at the cluster, and if most data points are falling well within reason, then you just look and you tip your cap to teams like Brigham Young. However, we're not putting them in the top 25. Right now we got them at 30. You guys notice Florida was in the top 25 this week. Florida we've got at 24. And predictably, there were a lot of people who looked and said, there is no planet, Earth or otherwise, where anyone would be able to favor Florida over Brigham Young right now. Are you kidding me? Undefeated versus 3-3. Let me tell you what the model would have. The model would have Florida as a 1.5 point favorite against Brigham Young on a neutral field. I hit up FanDuel, and it will bring you some comfort to know that FanDuel technically agrees with you guys, but it's virtually a pick 'em. So if they saw that game happen on a neutral field, what I'm telling you is there's not a ton of disagreement between the actual sports book and what my numbers have. Brigham Young minus 0.5, which of course is a number that wouldn't exist. So they would either put out BYU minus 1 or they'd put Brigham Young pick 'em against Florida. I mean, that's about 1.5 point deviation from what I've got. So all they're telling you is it's not that crazy to think Florida and Brigham Young are very comparable in terms of profile right now. All I'm trying to do with this is I'm trying to help you understand having Brigham Young number 30 in a power rating means nothing about how I feel about the team. I'd have them probably ranked top 20 right now if I were ranking them. If I was a playoff committee member, well, obviously they're tied for first in the Big 12. So they don't need my endorsement. All they need to do is keep winning, and they would get themselves a first-round bye if they go on and win the conference championship. So all I'm trying to do is explain the methodology there. And I think if I know our audience like I think I do, this will bring a wave of questions when the JP poll comes out next week about where I have teams placed and what does FanDuel think about this. And then we'll probably be back this time next week doing this. Quick Trip is powering, dare I say, Quick Trip is fueling the whole new Saturday tour. For instance, tonight, right after we get off air, moments after we get off air, it's vroom vroom over to Knoxville. We'll be in Knoxville all day tomorrow. All the more reason to be following on Instagram at LateKickJosh because I have no idea what I'll get into over there. Probably going to work out in the Tennessee weight room at some point tomorrow if Josh Heupel opens the door, which he does. He's really good to us. So, Quick Trip, giving out a ton of free gas. Just keep visiting Quick Trip, as I probably will at some point later tonight, and keep taking those pictures of yourself and showing us that you're there. That's one way to get free stuff. As I've said, the other way to get free stuff, make sure you got their app. There's a QR code right here, or you can just search for it and download it in your app store. There is a dot in the show description on YouTube. If you want free stuff, exclusive for our audience, if you want free stuff through that app, drop the email address there. Don't have to. There's no requirement to. It's just if you want free stuff above and beyond the random chance that I may give you a free tank of gas, that's how you get it. All right. I have got a couple more things to hit you with, and then we're going to go to Cubelic. By the way, I got 2 added best bets coming up. Not 1, but 2. Oh, yeah, good job, Jesse. Proud of you. Proud of you. I skipped something. And Jesse has used the teleprompter for, what, the second time? The second or third time this year. So it just goes to show you there is a teleprompter in the studio, and sometimes we even use it. Jesse's message to me is, you skipped FanDuel's Game of the Year. No, I didn't. Well, I did, but it's right here. I had the Post-it on my finger the entire time. I have some news for you guys. It's right here on this Post-it on my index finger. These games of the year have moved a little bit. We talked about this last week. Just if you think you have a read on these teams, I want to go ahead and give you fair warning. There is money to be made. Look at the screen right now. Tennessee plays Georgia in a few weeks. On November 16th. Georgia plays Texas this weekend. Tennessee plays Bama this weekend. Based on how those outcomes go, that number could shift. Right now, if you like Georgia, you could get them minus 9.5. You could take 9.5 with Tennessee. How about Ohio State, Michigan? You think Ohio State's going to run them out of the building? Lay 18.5 and take them. Because that's the number right now. Ohio State minus 18.5. But the one I want to direct your attention to is right there on the bottom of the screen. Last time you and I spoke, Texas was an 11.5 point favorite against Texas A&M last week of the regular season. That number is down to 8.5. The number moved a field goal, and all that's happened since then is Texas beat Oklahoma, so their profile didn't drop any, and A&M was off. I think what happened is a lot of people realized, whoa, that game's up at FanDuel right now because we mentioned it. We mentioned it emphatically last week, and some money got dumped on Texas A&M. That's what happened. So games of the year, guys. It's not just for show. These are not Christmas ornaments. Ohio State's laying 3.5 at Penn State. You can go bet it right now. Oregon's only minus 10.5 against Michigan. Michigan can't score. Oregon can score in bunches. We'll go lay the 10.5. You think Ole Miss still has a lot to play for? Take plus 4.5 when they play Georgia on November 9th, I believe. And Bama at LSU. Some of you are very high on LSU. Some of you are not high on Bama. Do you understand you can get LSU plus 4.5 at home against Alabama? All of those are available. You can bet them right now on FanDuel. I am just the messenger. There are some teams out there that I regret to inform you the public may be sleeping on. And it's just the beginning of the second half of the season. So we had Jeremy hit us up. He said, is it possible some teams have been written off too early since the playoff is 12 teams now? Yeah. I wasn't the biggest proponent of expanding the playoff, but I just got to ask some of you who love this thing, do you really want 12 teams? Are you aware that 12 teams make this thing? Because frankly, I think a lot of you still are applying 4-team logic to a 12-team era. I mean, Texas A&M, just as an example, is very much alive. And after they lost to Notre Dame, it's like people said, well, yep, toss them on the scrap heap. Why? They've won every game since then. And they really popped versus Missouri, which is the last time they played. I mean, Connor Wigman checked the quarterback box. You already knew they could run the ball. You already knew they could play defense. And then all of a sudden they have Connor Wigman just throw it all over Missouri. If they have that happening, you know what they have the rest of the way schedule-wise? They got a road game this weekend against Mississippi State. They're favored by 18.5 now. They play LSU, but they play them at home. They play Texas, but they play them at home. And honestly, with only one loss, A&M can afford to lose again, which is gross to say. I hate this. But they can afford to lose again. So why is no one talking about A&M? We will, if no one else will. Clemson, I got them 5th in the JP poll right now, solidly. I believe in them. But I think most of the public remembers they got blown out against Georgia. Do you remember it was 6-0 at halftime? Not a big deal. Georgia starts slow against everyone. But since then, since the loss to Georgia, Clemson on a 243-96 run. They've won every game by 16 plus. Now, that could be a product of schedule. Who knows? Could be a product of schedule. But if it is, I got bad news for you. There is no team that is on the horizon that is built to undress Clemson again until when? The ACC title game. So they play Virginia. Eventually, they'll go to Virginia Tech, a team playing right now, a team I'm about to talk about in a second. Jesse, hey, since we've already used the prompter once tonight, can you load the Virginia Tech score? Never mind, I see they're blowing Boston College out. Boy, that adds fuel to the point I'm about to make. Anyway, back to Clemson. They play Louisville at home. They go to Virginia Tech. They go to Pitt. That's a 3-week stretch coming up that will determine whether they go to Charlotte or not. Now, conveniently, it is Thursday night as you and I are talking. I'm live right now. Maybe some of you are listening to the replay. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but Virginia Tech is sort of low-key bending Boston College over. Again, it's early. But do you remember Virginia Tech? Remember how every preview magazine that wanted to seem ultra sharp told you Virginia Tech's the team to watch in the ACC? And then what happened? They got beat by Vandy, and you forgot about them. And then they slipped past a couple of teams, and then they got beat by Rutgers, and you really forgot about them. And that's all well and good, but those weren't conference games. Their first conference game wasn't until Miami a couple of weeks ago. And half of you think they got screwed in that game. That was the one at the very end where the call got overturned. Yeah, that was Virginia Tech. And then they went to Stanford quietly and won, and then they went into their bye week, and now they've come out of it on fire because they're up 21-0 early against Boston College. Could they get hot? Because everyone expected it from Virginia Tech, or at least a lot of people did early in the season. Then they lost some games. I mean, they lost to Vandy. Cool. So did Alabama. So did Kentucky. They lost to Rutgers. Rutgers has been a very solid team this year so far, and they lost close. They lost to Vandy in overtime. They lost to Rutgers close. They lost a 4-point game to Miami. Could they get hot? It's got all the indicators here. They could be a 6-3 team when Clemson comes to town with one conference loss, and that one could be one to watch. Kansas State's a team I think we need to pay close attention to. They've got the stink of that BYU loss on them, which they should. It's still inexplicable how that happened. They've been an unsteady road team. They barely got past Tulane. They didn't get past Brigham Young. They what else have they? They go to West Virginia this weekend. They squeaked past Colorado last week, but they did win. Avery Johnson has improved as a passer. I've liked the way the profile of the team has scaled a little bit as the season has gone on. They've got a back half that ends with a trip to Ames, Iowa, last game of the regular season to play Iowa State. They also could get hot here. It's the Big 12. Literally anything can happen. And lastly, a team that I cannot for the life of me understand. It's LSU. I understand plenty about the team. It's the fan base that has me confused right now. Some of you have followed me for a long time, back when we were in Columbus, Georgia. And you know the 2019 season was really special. It was special for LSU, but it was special for us because we got on LSU in the summer and everyone else was on Alabama. So then LSU starts to become the giant they became that year, and we started to get a lot of traction with LSU fans. LSU fans started watching our stuff when no one was, and a year later, CBS calls, and it was largely on the wave of publicity and notoriety that LSU fans gave us because of the attention that they paid to the show. So I am forever indebted to LSU fans. I have this like portion of my heart that just like waves a purple and gold pom-pom every Saturday. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because I have been made aware that on certain corners of the LSU internet community, they think we hate LSU. And when I tell you nothing, I mean nothing could be further from the truth. We've picked every LSU game correctly this year. What I think has happened is we've picked them to lose a couple of games and they lost them. And then afterwards, like you don't give someone retroactive credit. You just don't like them because they picked against the team regardless. We've been pretty spot on with LSU. They got a dogfight on their hands this weekend. So they had the huge win against Ole Miss. They've got a huge spot against Arkansas this Saturday. They got one loss, and it's to USC. They are perfect in conference play right now. And I'm not sure America understands that. They've got a better conference record than Alabama. They've got a better conference record than Georgia. Do you think most of America, let me backtrack, do you know that? When you think LSU, do you think undefeated in conference play ahead of Bama and Georgia, ahead of Tennessee? Do you think that? I don't know that most people think that because they remember the loss, and it was one of the first things they saw this year, USC, and so you kind of just erased LSU from your mind, and then they went to South Carolina, barely won. So your mind just convinces you, well, if they didn't get clipped here, they will get clipped. Well, you don't know that because the talent profile of this team is still good enough to where if they figured themselves out, they could go on a little run here. They got a top 10 passing game. Defense is creating pressure. Defense has massively scaled up its performance level from last year. LSU is a sleeper team as well. They get Bama at home. They're a sleeper team as well. So there's some love for LSU. We're probably just saying that, though. We probably still hate them. Hating LSU. Whomst amongst us that didn't grow up a Florida fan or like a Bama fan or something, like who in the world would hate LSU? Not I. There's the odds right now to make the playoff, courtesy of FanDuel. And the reason Director Colin shows you that is because FanDuel is our exclusive odds provider, and they will power Friday Night Lines tomorrow night. So make sure you're following on Instagram at LateKickJosh. I have got Ramen Noodle Express best bets to add here before we bring in Cubelic. So we've already been on Auburn. Did you see what happened to this number? So we got on Auburn early. Auburn was our Sunday night game. We got on them. I knew that number would not last. So Auburn was plus 6.5. They're at 4, I think. They're plus 4 now. But we got them when we got them. Ball State plus 26.5 against Vandy. We're on them. We're on Florida plus 1.5 against Kentucky. We, along with the rest of the free world, apparently, are laying 3.5 with Texas. I like the number. We got Texas minus 5 on the model. So Texas minus 3.5 against Georgia. Okay, we're adding 2 games here. One of the most dependable brands that we have ever consistently backed over the course of a season, Iowa. We see no reason not to back them again this week. They're on the road. They're laying 5.5 against Michigan State. We like them by a touchdown or more. And, this is a little more hold your nose-ish, but FSU, they still qualify as a play this week. FSU plus 3.5. We bet numbers. We don't bet teams. So this number qualifies. FSU at Duke, that's a Friday night game. So if it loses, we'll get it out of the way early, but we don't think it'll lose. So FSU and Iowa, we have added to the card here. Now, what I'm going to do is something I have not done since our Quick Trip commitment, and that is for everyone who already hates the show, just make them hate us even more, because I am going to be pretentious enough to sit here as me and say, let's now toss it to Josh Pate, who has Cole Cubelic along with himself. Yeah, thanks, Josh. Got Cole Cubelic here, SEC Network, Cube Show. Is it McElroy and Cube? Cube and Mac? Like, which of your names comes first in the name of that radio show?
McElroy, obviously, yep. Quarterback always comes first. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, 7 to 10 a.m. Central, Jocks 94.5. You can get that one on YouTube, on the app.
Show, but I think it is relevant nationally. That's what I think. And this is the last compliment I'll give you today. I would listen to that if I lived in Salt Lake City.
We have hit Utah some. Had a big Cam Rising conversation earlier this week. So, yep, that works.
Didn't we all? So, I don't know if you're aware.
Well, Spencer Petras, Utah State talk.
Oh, my goodness. What a throwback, even though he still exists. Like, what a throwback. So, we've got Georgia, Texas this Saturday. It's the primetime game on ABC. It's out in Austin. It's a conference game. It's awesome. Everyone's ready for it. We've had it circled all year. So, I looked at it the other day. I drew a little bit of heat, maybe moderate heat, for basically committing the sin of repeating Kirby Smart. Kirby looked at Texas's defense and said, they remind me of better versions of ourself, which indicated two things to me. Number one, Georgia's got all the critical traits that those great Georgia defenses have had. And then number two, it sounded like Kirby's telling you we kind of don't have that kind of defense ourselves this year. A lot of that's due to injury. A lot of that's due to attrition. Guys get drafted because they're too good, stuff like that. So I looked at the game and I thought to myself, okay, there are a couple of things I've been able to rely on with Georgia. They're usually dependable on the ground. They're 92nd in that category this year. And also limiting chunk plays through the air. They're usually top 25 there. They're 68th right now. So a couple of the aspects that I used to be able to count on with Georgia, period, much less to travel on the road, those aren't there. That doesn't mean you lose the football game, because we could poke holes in pretty much every resume out there right now. But I think it's a Carson Beck game, man. It's got to be a Carson Beck game. I think as much as I think Texas is the better team, strangely, when I started to break the thing down, a lot of it centered on Georgia, because if Texas is Texas, I feel good about them. There's a lot I think that Georgia has to do, I don't know, maybe above and beyond what I've seen so far from them this year. I've looked at that thing all week. You've looked at it, but I think you ISO'd maybe a little bit different angle than I've heard anyone else talk about. So share with the entire world right here how you see this Georgia-Texas game.
Well, first, I thought you were going to go with something you took heat for this week was going to be saying that Texas is the new Georgia. Was that a real quote of yours?
Well, it was a quote on a thumbnail. I won't go as far as to say it was an actual quote. I did say that this year's Texas team looks more like Georgia than this Georgia team looks like past versions of Georgia. All the stuff that Georgia normally brings to the table, I think this Texas team brings, and I will not apologize for that because it's true.
Okay. But to be this Georgia now, you need a couple championships in recent memory. So that will be the only outlier that I feel like you maybe forgot there, but that's okay. Similar to me throwing out the statistics that all of Georgia's game played against the AP number one team have been at neutral sites, and saying, well, when you're just always the number one team, you can't play that game at home, which it's 127 years of football. So it's not exactly been that way always, but nonetheless, here's what I think Georgia has to do defensively. I'm going to reference these as detachments. I don't really have a technical football term that's utilized to group all of this together. But one thing that Sark does extremely well is he gets you looking one way and he hits you the other way. And that can be with certain run plays. It can be with motions. But where he's masterful is that bringing people close to the football, so bringing people in the tackle box essentially, and then utilizing that person quickly through the air the other direction. So a receiver into the backfield, back out of the backfield, run play fake to the left, hit him back the opposite way. Tight end looks like he's staying in the block. We're going to run fake counter to the left. He leaks out to the right. Receiver comes in, looks like he's going to stay in the backfield, and then they hit him out. With run fakes and motions, all this, he gives you all the eye candy to take the majority of your attention away, Josh, but then it's someone who was attached to the line of scrimmage or attached to that tackle box that's going to leave and be somewhere else. If you watch the Oklahoma game, Gunnar Helm was big with this. A couple of times backs out of the backfield. Go to that Michigan game, and there were a couple of running backs out of the backfield that were quickly hit. Extensions of the run game, but detached from the tackle box. Georgia just plain and simple has to be aware that that can happen, and they must defend that because it's stealing. It's free grass, as Roman Harper would call it. And you can't give teams those kind of yards in a game like this. You have to make them work. Texas is an explosive play football team. And if they're doing that with that high percentage of throws, similar to what Quinn did last week, you're making life too easy on them. On the other side, I think it's really simple. I agree with a lot of what you said about this being a Carson Beck game. I would say, not to say that it's not going to be a Carson Beck game, but a Trevor Etienne game. Because when you see what he did against Auburn late when he had the opportunity, and that wasn't 4 quarters of it, and then what he did a little bit last week against Mississippi State, the dynamic nature of what he's able to do is starting to come out. It just hasn't been consistent as we're going to give this guy the ball 35 times a game. But he's an explosive play waiting to happen. And I think it's through the air, handing it to him. They need a little more balance. They cannot continue to get away from being just this drop back football team because the tackles have not been great in pass protection. And against this team, that'll be a big problem. Colin Simmons can get to the quarterback. Barron Sorrell can move outside and get to the quarterback. Ethan Burke can move outside and get to the quarterback. They'll even take Anthony Hill Jr., line him up outside, rush him. He's got plenty of pop to be able to live out there and rush the quarterback. You cannot live against this defense if you can't protect your quarterback on the edges, and Texas can attack you there. Now, Texas might not be great in the secondary. It looks like they're much better, but we don't really know. I mean, Michigan's offense, Mississippi State, first start for a freshman quarterback. I mean, they've played some teams whose passing offenses are not great. So we'll see if Georgia can protect enough to then test that. And then if that Texas secondary is not a whole lot better, I agree with you then. That's where Georgia probably has a chance to go win this football game.
Well, that's the path. If we're sitting there, the dust settles late Saturday night and they won, you and I were doing some recap show, what we're probably saying is, wow, Texas came in with, I think, the number 2 rated pass defense in the country, but they hadn't even faced like a top 50 caliber quarterback. So much like when Georgia faced Bama and they hadn't allowed a touchdown, and then the first 4 drives were touchdowns, we found out a little bit of it was a mirage based on schedule having been played. The second thing would be, remember that Washington game when Texas played Washington in the semifinal last year? And remember how they had to play catch up. Like that was a Washington team that put them in a lot of conflict in terms of having to play catch up. And that was when errors started to happen. And the other thing was, I remember watching that and feeling like, I don't know, he's good, doesn't feel like himself. And I look at, then you fast forward to this year and I look at this game, there's a lot of weaponry that they can use. They go very deep in guys that can catch the football. I had this written down. They got 6 pass catchers with a catch of 40-plus yards this year. They got 7 players with a rush of 20-plus yards this year. So there's a lot of weaponry there. So as Meemaw would say, you got 13 holes in the dam. You can either choose to use your 10 fingers to try and plug it, and no bueno, or you can just get to the water source. So I ask you, that would be the quarterback in this case, how effective can Georgia be at getting to the quarterback, affecting the quarterback, where a lot of that other stuff doesn't come into play so much?
I think they can be effective getting there. The problem is are Sark and Quinn Ewers going to give them the opportunity to? Because the ball gets out so quick. We had a production meeting on Sunday, and this kind of goes back to some of the other things we talked about last week and fans just not appreciating wins in this day and age. And the first thing that a guy on our crew brought up, he said, well, Quinn Ewers only completed 1 pass over 5 yards in the game. I said, give us 34-3 rivalry game. What are we talking about? Like, what are we picking apart here? I just think with the nature of how he gets rid of the football, it's going to be tough to get there. And then you got to deal with 2 really good offensive tackles. I mean, Kelvin Banks is going to go in the first round. And I think you can make an argument that Cam Williams is one of the most improved offensive linemen in the SEC. So you got Jake Majors that runs the show up there at center. Like, they're not going to turn a lot of guys free. So you're going to have to earn it. And that's where it's going to be difficult and how often are you going to run into being close, getting there, almost there? And that's what Carson Beck's been great at, because when you tell people the Georgia tackles haven't been great, they'll throw the sack numbers at you. And it's no, that's not the problem. The problem is when you forecast ahead and look at how they've operated, it could be very problematic. So I don't even know if it's about just getting those wins, Josh. It's about finding a way to confuse Quinn Ewers to where the quick game can't live anymore, then you're going to have to find a way to probably get some one-on-ones at the quarterback, and it's going to be tough. Georgia got a couple guys that can do it. It's just a matter of putting Texas in the situations where they have to attempt those elongated drops that they have the opportunity to get to the quarterback.
This is week 8. I mean, we could just as easily stick a fork right in the middle of this week's schedule. It is such a fork in the road moment for, I don't know, what do you think, like a dozen to 24 teams, really, if you look across the country.
Easy.
I mean, we're talking about now, if we get to Sunday morning, the difference in the A-B scenario. I'll just throw a game at you, but we could go down 10 different roads here. The LSU-Arkansas game is just a quintessential example of the fork in the road moment. You've got Brian Kelly and LSU. They just came off this Ole Miss win. If they go up there and win, they're right in the thick of it. I don't know why people don't have this game on their playoff radars, but it should be there anyway. SEC championship picture radar should be there. But I digress. If they win that thing versus if they lose that thing. Because if they go up there and they lose that thing, you know what they're saying about him. And then conversely, the Arkansas team that no one's talking about, I've got enough respect to have them in my top 25 right now. If they win Saturday, they're a 2.5-point dog at home. If they win, man, they've got one conference loss. The other one's to Oklahoma State. And then you look at the schedule, they got Texas coming up, but everything else is winnable, and who knows about Texas. And Arkansas's in every picture versus if they lose and they're a 3-loss team at that point, people just crank up the Sam Pittman hot seat. Sam Pittman, when's he going to step aside for the betterment of the program talk? It could be the difference in a made or missed field goal at the end of regulation, by the way. That is the fork in the road game, one of several actually this weekend.
There's a ton. I mean, imagine waking up, what would that be, the 20th? October the 20th, Arkansas is 5-2 and just knocked off a top 10 LSU team, both Mississippi schools ahead of them, Texas, like you said, La Tech, and then Missouri. And you've shown a little bit of the blueprint that it would take, I think, to be able to get here. Now, Taylon Green, Jaquindon Jackson, it's not about availability. It's about how close to 100% are they going to be able to operate in that game, because I think you have to have those two at close to full strength to win this game. But what has Travis Williams done this year? He has altered the plan multiple times against different offenses and been able to have success. They can do that against Garrett Nussmeier, who's also shown you he'll throw it to the other team. That's happened a couple of times. Then all of a sudden you've got an opportunity to go take this game. I think they try to slow it down. I think they try to limit the possessions for LSU to even have. But you're right, Josh. I mean, this is one. It doesn't feel like LSU's getting a ton of playoff buzz. I feel like they should be. Maybe it's because of how they won the Ole Miss game and they weren't in control of it. I don't really care about game control. But now all of a sudden you knock off Ole Miss, then you win at Arkansas. Yes, you have a difficult game with Texas A&M on the road coming up next and Alabama after that. But you're sitting there at 6-1 with a couple really nice wins under your belt, and your only loss coming to a USC team that maybe is fading. But this is just one of the many games that I feel like totally different scenarios could be happening with either team, whoever pulls out the victory. And maybe we're going to talk about teams that could be heading in different directions if they were to win or lose some of these games coming up this weekend.
Florida game feels the same way to me. I mean, Kentucky's going down there.
Massive.
Florida. So Florida's over a 2-touchdown dog against Tennessee. They take them to overtime. The line never made any sense to me, but you still lost the game. You don't really get credit for covering. So they're 3-3 right now. Mertz is out for the year. Kentucky's coming in there. I'm going to tell you right now, again, the line doesn't make sense to me. I think Florida should be favored in the game. That's okay. That's where you put your money where your mouth is. So I've done that. If they win this game, okay, then you start looking at 4-3. And I'm trying to pull up my helmet schedule here. You start looking at the back half-ish of your schedule, and who do you have? You've got a bye week, then you got the Georgia game in Jacksonville, then you go to Texas, you got LSU, Ole Miss. There's not a lot that I can blindly place hope in down the stretch. I got the Florida State game at the end of the year. 3-4 versus 4-3 going into that bye week is probably the difference in employment stati, which is the plural of status down there. And then on the other side, Kentucky, you got a better read on that team because you've done games a couple of times there. I'm mainly looking at the Florida perspective. That feels like about as must-have a game as there is on the SEC slate this weekend.
Well, first off, somebody's coming out on Sunday below 500. Somebody's going to be over 500. And they both need the trajectory to start heading up, because there's a lot of things you can complain about with both these teams. It feels like Florida is finding a few more things right now than Kentucky is. Kentucky may be losing grasp of a couple of things. specifically on offense, they cannot create explosive plays. And with those receivers, it just does not make sense. I don't know what kind of a fit the quarterback is to what they want to do or need to do. They were going to go big last week, put an extra offensive lineman in the game, Josh, and they did it the first 2 plays of the game, and then they didn't do it again. So I don't know really what they are offensively. I don't know if they know what they are offensively. I do know you're going to be able to lean on that defense a lot of the time. So if you can find a way to get this one, Auburn at Tennessee, tough, but we've seen a couple people kind of neutralize the passing portion of that team. Murray State at Texas, Louisville. It feels like this is one that both those teams almost have to have. If you're going to find a way to end this season on a positive note, this is one you got to get now.
I'm not calling it. By the way, I've done like 5 shows this week where they've asked me about Bama, Tennessee, and they've called it a playoff elimination game. I have no idea in what world this is a playoff elimination game. As far as I can tell, the loser incurs their second loss. I mean, I have got a half decent reason to believe we'll see a 3-loss SEC team in the playoffs. So it's not that for me. But outside of that, if Bama goes in there and wins, then, well, it's a Tennessee loss at home, and they've been shut out in the first half of their last 2 games before this. So I would imagine unless it's a 42-35 loss, you've got more chronic questions about the offense. And then on the other side, man, if Kalen DeBoer goes 0 for the state of Tennessee, and they've looked nothing like themselves basically from the first half of the Georgia game on. You had the second half of the Georgia game. You had the Vandy game. You had the South Carolina freak-out fest last week. If they go up there and they can't get the job done, everything's still in play for both of them. But yeah. I don't think that'll change how your call-ins sound on Monday morning, if that makes any sense.
Well, one thing we can be assured of is that both teams will have a large portion of their fan bases pissed off on Sunday, because that's just been that way since the NC State game for Tennessee and pretty much all year for Alabama. So ones that aren't necessarily appreciating the wins that are happening this year, I don't think they're going to appreciate this one because it's a rivalry game. I think a lot of it would depend on the loser of this game, how it went. If it's Alabama getting torched through the air and they find a way to win, you're going to get a lot of complaining. It's just going to happen. If it's Alabama losing in some sort of a shootout and you felt like the ground game could have been there, there'll be some complaining about that. Tennessee, if Dylan Sampson goes for 396 yards and they win this game, there will be statements such as Josh Heupel can no longer call plays. Defenses have this offense figured out. And what are we going to do? Because obviously the blueprint has now been laid and we can't call plays anymore. So either way, it's going to happen. I think it comes down to the 2 other sides of the ball. I think Alabama's offense, can you find some balance? Can you run the ball and keep it away from that Tennessee offense just a little bit? Because if they do get to your secondary, you don't want them to get many opportunities to. And then on the flip side of that, Tennessee's defense still probably not getting enough credit. I know Keenan Peely's out. That's a big blow. Yeah. But that defensive line against Alabama's offensive line, that's what I want to watch. Like, that's must-see TV. That's a heavyweight title fight. Like, give me more of that. And can they get Dylan Sampson going? I don't know. When Tennessee has the football, Alabama's D-line is getting a little bit better. Like, I thought Latham had maybe his best game in an Alabama uniform last week. We've seen Quindarius Robinson off the edge be a little bit better. So it feels like it's going to be a wide receiver DB game, when in actuality, I think this comes down to being a line of scrimmage game.
You know, the thing that this probably hinges on to me is, number one, explosive plays, which you could say about a lot of games. But the other thing that's a total wild card, I have no idea what kind of model can forecast this. It's kind of like turnovers. I mean, Bama's sitting there 119th in the country in penalty rate, and they've been some bad penalties, and they really haven't been put in a pressure cooker environment on the road yet. Wisconsin was out of it early. Vandy, you had more Bama fans there than Vandy. You lost the game, but it wasn't because of the environment. Actually, I don't even think Nick Saban was wrong in what he said about playing at Vanderbilt. So now I'm taking a very penalized team and I'm putting them in that environment. But Tennessee's not much better. They're 88th in the country there. So if I look at that as a wash, because I have no idea how to forecast it otherwise, if it just comes down to explosive play rate, I probably trust Milroe in Alabama a little bit more. But I feel like probably you did the best job, actually, of anyone I saw this past week, of explaining Tennessee's offense, difference between scheme being a problem versus just execution being a problem, which to me makes them feel like this rubber band that's pulled back, and you just, like, for whatever reason, you can't let go of it. But whenever you finally figure out a way to let go of it, That's Tennessee goes from being shut out in the first half to, oh, they got 23 on the board against Alabama at halftime. That kind of stuff would not shock me here.
Well, here's the thing with Tennessee's offense, and this is what I loved what they did in the offseason when Joey Halsey and Josh Heupel told us that they spent really the entire offseason on physicality, more tight ends, more downhill runs. They wanted to be able to win different style fights. And after the NC State game, I think we all looked at it and said, holy mother, like they are going to be that kind of team. Now we kind of realize NC State might be a little bit different than we thought, but they're still really good at it. And if they can get the offensive line going again, at least certain portions of it, I think the middle for the most part has, and right tackle have, but with the tight ends assistance, that can be something that they lean on while the passing game gets figured out. And if you missed the super technical breakdown that Josh is referencing on Monday's Read and React, it essentially was showing you incomplete passes down the field that were wide open, passes that were caught out of bounds, fumbled plays in the running back quarterback mesh, and throwing into triple coverage. Those are things that can be eliminated and be repaired.
Scheme.
Play calling is another thing that you forgot there as well. So, all of those people that said that it just can't be done and defenses have it figured out. When I see a receiver, and that's why I love kind of looking at Twitter at games that happen while I'm working, because I don't get to see them, and then I'm going to go watch it the next day. And I think we've talked about this since week one. What I was seeing in that game was Josh can't call plays. Defenses have us figured out. Nico's not any good. I was like, wow, this is going to be bad. Wide open receiver, 50 yards downfield, overthrown. Wide open receiver downfield, ball not thrown enough for him to run under it. Wide open out route receiver catches it just barely out of bounds. Great catch. Fumbled mesh play on the zone read. Other team recovers. Interception thrown into triple coverage. And I'm thinking, this doesn't feel like scheme or play calling to me. It just feels like mistakes that can be corrected. So also this new secondary for Alabama, we know the pattern matching stuff had some issues with it. They can be better suited with it, with what they're doing now. We don't know, haven't seen it that much. So there's a ton of intrigue as to how this game's going to go. Because I don't think there's been a couple games this year, Josh, I've thought Alabama could just go push people around. I don't think Amari Thomas, Omar Norman Lott, and those guys, I don't think Bama's just pushing them. I'm not saying that they get pushed either, but that's kind of a stalemate. So you take that and scrap it and say, all right, now what? Do you add a blocker and run your quarterback more with no Keenan Peely? I feel like that could be an advantage. So a lot of different directions. I think this one, in those explosive plays, we know the Tennessee receivers still have them. We know Ryan Williams can make them. We know Jeremy Bernard can make them. So Jalen Milroe can make them. It may come down to that.
Hey man, I saw one Bama fan say something earlier this week, which is a wild thing to think about, but he may not be wrong. Could it be that getting a wide receiver back, could it be that getting Law back is as integral to their run blocking as the 5 they have on the field? Now, I know that you don't like hearing that, but Law is a devastating blocker when he's in.
I appreciate the sentiment because he's been on the block party like 3 times this year, and he hadn't even played in the last couple games. He and Cedric Alexander, running back at Vanderbilt, they're invited always because they will blow you up at positions that we normally don't talk about. The problem is, I haven't seen a failure in the Alabama run game because of what's happening on the perimeter. So honestly, the only failure in the Alabama run game is the lack of commitment to it.
Okay.
That's why we pointed out in the Vanderbilt game. I looked over to our stats guy and I said, during the commercial, and I said, can you please tell me how many times Alabama has run the ball in consecutive plays? This is late third, early fourth. After our next break, he looks over and he goes, 3. By the way, 2 of those were touchdowns on the second run. They ended up being 4 for the game. And there's just this, maybe it's just me, but run game goes for 4 or 6, or even if it goes for 1 and there's good push, which is what I would see, it's 4 or 5 wide and we, spit it out, go and throw again, which you have good receivers and a great quarterback. So I understand it to an extent, but when you can live there, I just think it changes everything across the course of a game. And they haven't decided to move in that house just yet.
The game that's off radars for some reason that I think has game of the week potential sneakily is an early kickoff. It's in Columbia, Missouri. It's Auburn at Missouri. A lot of folks like Auburn in this. I do as well. You've thrown up the caution tape all week. Give you a couple of reasons here. Number one, I don't think Brady Cook has looked right all year. And also, when Missouri has been their best, they've really been able to lean on a pretty solid ground game, like having Cody Schrader back there, for example. So in this particular game, like if I can get Noel, if I can get Carroll to be that, that's wonderful. Auburn is sort of middle of the pack statistically against the run. That'd be great. That'd get me one-on-ones with Weiss and Burden, and I'd feel good about Missouri if you could guarantee me all that. But I've listened to you guys talk about Missouri. I've sat there, I've watched Missouri, I've seen Missouri in person. No one is really respecting their ability to stretch the field, because I don't think many defensive coordinators right now respect that Brady Cook is 100% Brady Cook. That's the first thing that I worry about. And then the second thing is, now this is an important word, what I think Auburn should be able to do. I think they should be able to lean on Jarquez Hunter the same way that A&M was able to lean on Le'Veon Moss in that game. I'm not going apples to apples. I would like to think Auburn can do that. Missouri's like 38th or something like that in the country against the run. I would like to think that if Peyton Thorne can throw for 338 against Oklahoma, I would like to think coming out of a bye that he can find guys and they can have enough success to move the ball down the field where if I've already seen Missouri get exposed once and they're off back-to-back road games and Auburn's rested, there's a lot of vibe that goes into that as well. I like the spot for them. So if everyone else is taking Auburn, I'll ride the wave with them. They're like a 4-point dog now. That's down from 6.5 earlier this week. I will take credit for moving that line, by the way. What say you? Why are we wrong on Auburn?
Well, here's the problem. First off, is sneakily related to spookily the square pumpkin? Yes or no?
I have no
distant cousin, maybe. Okay.
What you're talking
you being childless. Yes, that would make sense that you wouldn't know about spookily just yet.
I had a childhood. I'm just childless.
They didn't have spookily when we were kids. Yeah. He's big time now though. All right. So my main problem with this is people saying what you just kind of closed with there. I love Auburn in this situation. I love them in this spot. It's Auburn, it's Missouri. So I'm going to go Auburn.
Yeah.
Well, this is not your daddy's Auburn. And one that you can just say, like Rick Trickett used to come to the whiteboard when I was playing and he would be like, we're Auburn, them's Mississippi State. Mm-hmm. We supposed to win this game. And you're just like, why are we practicing today?
All game.
No middle drill today. Is that what you're saying? A couple of things that I have an issue with. I agree with you on Brady Cook. He has not looked like himself. And I wondered before the year if he could just take something close to the step that he took from 2 years ago to last year, he might be a really good SEC quarterback. It's not there. Very concerned about Nate Noel, because if he's not able to go or close to what he's been, he has made the stretch play go for them. Marcus Carroll's fine, but Nate Noel glides when he runs that play. It doesn't look like he's trying. And if you go back to that A&M game, Nick Scorton, I think it was the fourth play of the game, tees off on Armand Membu, the right tackle for Missouri, who's their best offensive lineman, and basically spikes that outside zone play. And I think sent a message saying, y'all ain't running that today. And they didn't. If you take the stretch play away from Missouri, it's problems, because they build everything off of that. And then they get the motions, and then they get the eye candy, and then they get the play actions and the books and the read plays and the RPOs. It all comes off that play. And so A&M was committed to taking it away. Now, I think Auburn has a guy in Keldrick Falk that can sort of be that guy. I also like the fact that Auburn can get a little bit bigger at linebacker and take like a Jalen McLeod and put him off the ball to be able to help with some of the stuff outside the C gap. But I just don't know if they have enough game wreckers inside to consistently be that team. The other part of this, Josh, I'm with you on Jarquez. And we heard Hugh Freeze earlier this week say, we've got to do a better job, can't remember the exact quote, of making sure he gets the ball. And my immediate thought was, well, how about call the plays?
Yeah, that's a start.
They go to him. And if there's a tag on it, remove said tag and just call it and run it. Now, that is football jargon that some people would know and some people don't know. Basically, don't call it with an RPO. Don't call it with a potential bootleg. Don't call it with an uncovered throw. Call inside zone, and by God, run inside zone. Maybe let him go left or right, depending on the look. But we are running inside zone here. If you can get to that, can he have some success? Maybe. But what the A&M offensive line did, they managed the movement extremely well, because Missouri moved a ton. I think too much. I think they were too aggressive in that game. I mean, it was stunts, pressures, run-throughs, slants, literally on every play. And A&M said, okay, we'll work it out and we'll pass it off. And like you said, Moss will find a way to get upfield and get going. Now, the other part is Connor Wigman was out of his mind in that game.
Sure.
Not only from the passes that he completed, his misses were exactly where they needed to be. There was no chance of an interception or any catastrophe play. So can Peyton Thorne be that? I think history has told us maybe for a lot of the game, but not all the game. I just don't like him on the road against an aggressive defense with an offensive line that hasn't been as good and a group of tight ends that's not consistent in helping out either in pass pro or in the run game. Inconsistency at receiver outside of one guy. So it's tough for me to sit there and have a ton of confidence that all those things are going to happen and Auburn's just going to find a way to get this win.
Yeah, I don't know what line that is in the Auburn Creed, but whatever. Okay, tell people what the YouTube channel is. Direct people there. Funnel them there.
Cube Show.
See,
absolutely miserable views this past week. I don't know what happened. Maybe I did a crummy job, probably. But if you can go subscribe, we're still not to 15,000, which Pate guaranteed he'd get us to a couple weeks ago. That was a whiff. But yeah, we're trying.
And I can't tell you guys how many burner accounts I made to try and get it there myself. So look, you got to do some of the lifting for me. Cube Show, people. Cube Show. You're single-handedly responsible for Vandy pulling off upsets in back-to-back weeks. I don't know what.
That's the only reason.
Not entertained?
It really is. That's the only reason. By the way, did you see Diego Pavia's growth that I pointed out in post-game interview after Kentucky?
I did.
When he almost dropped the S-bomb and didn't. I mean, I feel like a proud dad right there. I was like, you have come a long way in 7 days.
I mean, you did everything but stroke him on the cheek and say, good job, son. Yeah, and then ask him about Pokey Pumpkin or whatever it is you just asked me about.
It's spookily the square pumpkin. Get it right.
Okay. You are off to what, Norman? You got South Carolina.
Yes, this is another one like you talked about. I mean, like fork in the road game. One of these teams is, let's take Oklahoma for a second. Nobody is looking at Oklahoma in a real positive light right now. I think everybody's thinking, oh, the offense is no good. They got a bad quarterback situation. What are they going to do?
Which is accurate, by the way.
It is. And the defense has still been great. All the offensive linemen have been hurt at one point in time. All the wide receivers are hurt. The running backs have been banged up. You win this game, you're sitting there all of a sudden at 5-2.
Yeah.
And you go to Ole Miss, who has some problems of their own that have been presented now, and have a chance to still put together a pretty good season. South Carolina, on the flip side of that, you seem to have found some life offensively with a couple things. You go to 4-3 with some winnable games still left on your schedule. Yeah, you got A&M the next week. I think they play for like the Governor's Trophy or something, some kind of trinket. But there are winnable games left on the schedule, and you could propel yourself into having one of these seasons that we're talking about. So it's one of the unfortunate parts of this 12-team playoff is, yes, we're talking about more teams maybe being in, but there are some great games after those teams that we've just kind of said, meh, we don't need to really get into those. I think it could be a great game. Both these defenses are awesome. If Oklahoma can just find some consistency on offense, maybe it'll be a fun game.
Week 8, it's teed up for us. And since I pre-recorded this, Cubelic has to sit here and watch me outro the show. Remember, tomorrow night, Friday Night Lines, live from Knoxville. We're not going to spam the live chat. None of us are going to spam the live chat. We're just going to watch it and submit our questions accordingly. For, that's still him, Cole Cubelic. I'm Josh Pate. Take care, guys. Enjoy the weekend of football, and we'll see you back here same time, Sunday night. Until then, God bless.